Welcome to the Retiring Real Estate Investor podcast, where we will discuss how to defer taxes on the sale of your property, earning passive real estate income, and everything you need to know to go from active investor to passive investor. Join us as we interview passive investment sponsors, explore the journey of other retiring real estate investors, and share our due diligence process we perform to select passive investments. Investment advisory services provided by Insight Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. This podcast is only intended for clients and interested investors residing in the states in which we are registered to provide investment advisory services or exempt from registration. Please contact us to determine if the firm provides investment advisory services in the state where you reside. All content on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Material presented is believed to be reliable sources, and no representations are made by our firm as to another party's informational accuracy or completeness. Insight Investment Advisors, LLC and its representatives do not provide tax or legal advice, and nothing herein should be construed as such. Always consult with your tax advisor or attorney regarding your specific circumstances. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Retiring Real Estate Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Bruckman. I am joined by Emma Powell. Emma is the founder and chief investment officer of Rise Capital Investments. Emma, how are you?
I am doing great. This is a semi-retirement that we're looking at right here, working and doing podcast interviews.
Oh man, yeah, we had a great conversation before that we had to stop and say, hey, we got to start recording because we're missing good stuff. So let's start here, Emma. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience? Tell them how you got to where you are, and what you're sort of up to now.
Yeah, so I was a stay-at-home school mom, 6 kids. I had a photography and graphic design business on the side. I decided to go back to college. I hadn't had an associate's degree. I get my bachelor's degree when I was like 37 or something like that. So I think I graduated with my bachelor's of business and graphic design like a couple of days before I turned 40. And it was this, I kind of went into a depression. People talk about a lot of times when you achieve a goal and then you don't really know where to go from here and you can get depressed. And so I found myself just kind of sitting around like, well, what am I going to do with my life now? Right. So I started applying for jobs. I've never had a job before because you don't get jobs with an associate's degree. Right. And I would always look at the jobs that I was qualified for, and they made so little money. I'm full time for like $35,000 a year as a transaction coordinator, real estate office, or something crazy like that. And I just was like, I'm not interested, right? So I'd always just start my own little businesses and work part time for the same money. And I started applying for jobs, and I was getting offers at like $20 an hour, 1099 contractor. I'm like, I got my degree for this. Like, I literally am making more money at a part-time photography business than I would be making working full-time for these guys. So it was very frustrating. And right after I graduated and I got like my first little graphic design, I started doing graphic design and presentation decks and things like that for companies, startup companies, things like that. And my husband got laid off. And I think that was like fall of 2017. And we just went into frenzy mode because I was not making enough money to support the family. And he found a new job and we moved across the country for it. It was really fast. And we had our dream home, like our little farm and everything. We remodeled it top to bottom, like blew all the walls out, like did most of the work ourselves. And we were planning on staying there for 20 years, right? And then all of a sudden we sold it and we find ourselves renting with no debt. We're Dave Ramsey guys and this pile of cash. And I thought, well, it's not enough cash to retire, right? My husband still has to work his corporate job. But I'm going to take this cash and I'm going to go do a better job with it. So I became a real estate investor and I tried to buy commercial right away, but nobody would give me a loan because I didn't know how to run I didn't have one rental, much less have a 12 unit or 14 unit building. So we had enough money to buy one, but we didn't have enough money to buy it and have a huge reserve that was going to make up for the fact that I had no experience. And so I couldn't quite bridge that gap. So I just started buying smaller rentals and I was supposed to be flipping them, but what ended up happening is I kept them as rentals and then I ran out of money. Now I had the experience, but I couldn't buy the building because I ran out of money. And my husband said, well, aren't you here about your real estate clubs? I joined all our local RIAs and everything like that you're supposed to be using other people's money to do this. I said, I don't know. It's just all right. He said, I challenge you to get into a property with no money of your own. And I was like, okay, that feels weird, but let's go try it. And it took me a long time to do that. I was still putting money into all of our commercial properties, but we were also bringing in investor capital alongside us. And what that ended up doing was just giving me a crash course on how to manage commercial properties. And the business started growing. And he got to the point where he really liked his job. we're like, okay, well, maybe we won't quit. And I had all these irons in the fire. And then I got to the point where I was like, honey, I think you could probably quit your job. I made enough money last year. We put aside a year's worth of income, year and a half. And we got this passive income coming from all the little rentals. And then we have all these apartment buildings that we can sell for $4 down the road. I said, I think you can quit your job. So we started really talking about that and seeing like, do we really, is that retirement? Is he going to have, are we going to have to start a business to supplement that? Just trying to figure out what that looked like. And he got laid off like 5 years to the day. Right. So, and the difference between the 2017 layoff and the 2022 layoff was stark, because the 2022 one, he was already talking about maybe quitting. And he called me, got laid off. And I was like, oh, I guess that decision got made for us. And now you get a severance and now you get unemployment. And so he hasn't had a job since November of 2022. So I could say that we're semi-retired, retired from corporate. I don't exactly know what to call it because we're living on the passive income from our little rentals. But we did start a business, a capital raising company, where we raise capital from other investors and hook them up with really great deals and really great operators. I don't want to operate anymore. That doesn't sound like passive income or retirement to me. But I also learned by trying to find great operators that there are people out there who are way better at this than I was. And we're scaling with integrated property management and staff of 150 people, these kind of companies. I thought, I'm never going to scale to that level. I'm not interested in that. So I would rather invest with that kind of operator who's doing this as a business, who doesn't want to be retired. And then people are like, well, what are you investing in that you retired early? And we're like, this is what we're investing in. So we just started a fund for legal reasons. There are a lot of rules around raising capital, right? So we wanted to make sure we stayed very compliant. Started a fund and we started just offering whatever we were investing in is what we stick in the fund. And if people want to jump on board with us, great. If not, they don't need to. The fund is a la carte, so they can get on there and invest in one deal and not the other deal. So we really want to make it customizable and a lot of opportunities for diversification. But that business doesn't actually make any money yet. It's not pre-revenue, but it's definitely pre-distribution or pre-profits. And so we've basically been living off of our savings and our passive income while we're kind of getting this business off the ground. And I realized I don't know, maybe we don't need to have a business. Maybe we don't need to work. But at the same time, on the days you're not working, kind of sitting around playing Angry Birds going like, well, there's got to be more than this, right? So we love the business to keep us busy, to keep us active, to keep us networking, and keep us out there and doing something that is purpose-filled, which I think a lot of people after they hit financial freedom are afraid they're going to lose their purpose. And they say, I never want to retire and all of that. But being financially free does not necessarily mean you're going to lose your purpose. It's kind of like when I graduated college and went through this period of, oh, what am I going to do with myself now? That's what we're going through again over the last couple of years since we left corporate. So that's our story in a 5-minute nutshell.
Where do I go? Oh, that's awesome. No, it's interesting. Let's talk about this concept of and we talked about a pre-call a little bit of this, are we retired or not? And that's very interesting. So I made the comment, from a corporate side, there's a path. It's rough, but you can see these markers if you're a W-2 worker of, all right, I hit 65 and certain things I have to start doing at 72. There's certain things I have to start doing, from taking funds out of certain accounts, etc.
Yep.
There's a rough path. Once you deviate from there, the road is rough and it's wild and there's not a lot of signs on it. How do you start thinking your way through all these things, the economics versus what I want to be doing on a day-to-day basis versus what I need to be doing? How do you balance that? How do you sort of think your way through that?
Well, that's a massive question. Let's just start out. It's a great problem to have. Wouldn't everybody love to have this problem? So once you get out of the way that this is a great problem to have, we can then acknowledge the fact that it's still a problem. I was reading recently, ultra high net worth people who have a big exit. They've made $10 million, $20 million on an exit. And it's almost like winning the lottery at that point, because maybe they're financially frugal and they have good personal finance, but it gets so much more complicated when your net worth starts to exceed $10 million. And you have to start thinking about things and planning things differently. And as I was reading about this club, the formation of the Tiger 21 Club, about how they got together as high net worth people who had this sudden influx, like a lottery type of exit, and they were terrified. And they had this preservation of capital intention behind the formation of this club, because they knew that they had built it once, but they weren't really sure if they could strike gold like that again. And they went into just almost like lockdown mode, like $20 million or 30 million, whatever. It's enough for anyone. And then we just need to invest it so that we make sure we don't lose it and we never go back to the way that we were before. And you hear stories like Elon Musk, where he took PayPal and put it all on the line to go out and build SpaceX. So these are the two personalities that we've got. Are you going to take what you built and go out and do something crazy and build something new? Are you going to lock down and preserve it and just go into preservation mode where you don't want to do anything too risky or too crazy? And we're doing something kind of in the middle, where we had to think about how do we want to spend our time? Because we weren't even 50 when we retired. And it becomes a question of, what do you want your life to look like? And I just had to spend a lot of time thinking about it. So when he first lost his job, we immediately went on a long hike. 3-month backpacking trip across Arizona, took our kids with us and just hiked every day for 3 months. The Grand Canyon, all those mountains. I mean, it was grueling. It was hot. And most of the time on the trail, you're just walking down, either thinking or singing the same song lyrics over and over, over and over. And I realized, like, I really did want to have some sort of a business, some sort of something to force me to get up and do something every day. High achievers, we have a hard time slowing down. And when we do, we feel bad about ourselves. We feel lazy. And so I just had to really think, like, how much free time versus work time do I want? That hike really allowed us to have the opportunity. And then once we got done hiking, we got a car, we bought an RV, we kept going. So we spent 1.5 years just traveling, being in different places, seeing if we wanted to live somewhere else. Kids are homeschooled. We're self-employed, financially independent investors. So let's go on a journey, right? Money was very tight. We're selling properties, reinvesting most of it into private lending so we can have better cash flow, and figuring out where that next paycheck is going to come from is very, very stressful. Like that was the worst part of this whole experience, is just some months, like, and every time you sell a property, you feel like you're killing the golden goose, especially if you're selling it in this market where you're not going to maximize your profits. That's been really, really tough. Living on 10% of your proceeds, so you can invest the other 90%. It's like the 4% rule, right? Yep. When you retire, you really have to be living on much, much, much less of your gains. That was a real struggle, and just kind of figuring out, is it 4%? Is it 10%? Like, what are we doing here? So giving ourselves the time to think before we just jump into the next thing was really, really important. While we were on trail, we'd already committed to starting our fund with some partners. Before my husband even got laid off, we were going to start this fund. And that was supposed to be our exit plan. Then it became almost a competition for our retirement time, but I'm so glad we did it, because while we were hiking, my partners were behind the scenes setting everything up and allowing us to get some really good lifestyle design, marketing material going on these trips. So there's really no silver bullet. And I think that's a problem. There's so many choices out there that what is it called? The dilemma of choice or something like that, where you have so many choices that you freeze up and you can't make one. And all this time I thought, oh, we have so many options, freedom, lack of control and all of this. And it wasn't until you said there are no signposts that I thought, yeah, that is the dilemma of choice right there. There's so many options, but you're still feeling very limited by your income. And you just don't know what to do. It's like those Tiger guys when they first had to exit and they were like terrified of losing it. I think that we all go through something similar. I built it slowly enough that I know that I could do it again. So I don't have that fear that if I lost everything, I couldn't go back and rebuild it. So that's a little different, because, a company strike gold once. Real estate is just boring, rinse and repeat over and over. You can go make money in real estate anytime. It takes time, but it's not like a lottery type of situation. So that was very comforting. And just making sure that we weren't working more than part-time, so that we could really focus on building a life that is really meaningful to us.
I think you mentioned lots of takeaways there, but then the first one is you went and thought. I just think a lot of people just don't go and think about it at all, right? So a lot of people that hit our desk are real estate investors who have managed a property for 20, 30, 40 years, multiple properties. And they think they might want to go do something else, but they really haven't sat down and really thought about it, not in the deep way or taking the time that you have. right? And so it's incumbent upon us to start to pose those questions. We'll do the economics first, right? So we'll work our way through the economics. Do you have enough money to live? Do you have enough money to leave a legacy and do what you want? Great. What are you going to do day one post close?
Yeah. Buy a backpack.
I don't know. Like most folks don't know. They just don't have an answer to that, right? And so it becomes an exercise of us to take the time for the first time probably ever to sit down and actually think about that. Of what are you going to do? Are you going to be fulfilled in that, in what you might do? What are even the options of what you would do when I give you your time back? Many people don't know. They haven't taken the time to think about it.
Well, I think how that came about for us is that we had it on a bucket list that when we did retire, that our youngest at the time was, when we were talking about this, she was 10. Okay, in 10 years, when she's 18, 20, somewhere around there, we're going to go hike the Appalachian Trail, just the two of us. It's a 6-month, right? And so that was just something we had in the back of our minds that we're going to do as a bucket list item. And we tossed the idea around a little bit, like, could we bring kids on this? Like, if we had an RV and our adult child was, we could get together every couple of days, things like that. I was like, if they're 16, 18 years old when we do this. So we had been kind of tossing it around from a logistics standpoint for a couple of years. And we just decided, like, I don't want to deal with that. We're just going to wait until the little one is or at least can be living independently. So when he got laid off, I said, what if we just do this now? Because we're starting this business. We kind of feel like we got to do it now, but let's do a shorter trail. Like, let's, instead of doing the whole Appalachian Trail, let's do something like Arizona or Colorado Trail. So that was where that came from. And then he was like, okay, yeah, let's do it now. And so the kids did not have a choice. We bought backpacks and we stuck their backpacks on them. We said, walk that direction. We rented out your house. Sorry, there's no going. And our 18-year-old really tried hard. She tried to call my adult kids to come down to Arizona and pick her up. And she was all for it. She was like, I'm looking to challenge myself, right? And then she gets down there and 4 days into it or a week into it, she was like, I'm done. We got to our first town stop, got a hotel, hot shower, restocked all our groceries. And she was like, I'm done. I'm calling my brother to come pick me up and I'll just go live with my sister. And I, you're 16 years old. I'm not that, you're a minor, you're staying with us. And that was really tough. It was really tough. And I think that the reason that this worked for us is because it didn't feel like taking time off to sit around and do nothing to think. It felt like we were doing something epic. And my daughter set a world record on that trail. She's the youngest, about age 11. She was the youngest person to ever hike the entire Arizona Trail. So we were doing something epic. But that's what gave us the feeling that we could take the time to think, because we weren't just sitting on a beach in Mexico getting bored.
Yeah.
We planned this difficult, arduous task that pushed our parenting and our survival and our outdoor skills to the limit. So it was very taxing what we're doing, but it gave us a lot of time to think. And so it felt justifiable to take that time to go and think.
So that's an interesting thing to think about. Like, I think most folks that hit my desk are thinking about Arizona, Florida, golf, beach, friends, leisure.
Yeah.
They're not thinking about what's in our epic thing that I can do or challenge that I can do to really engage myself. That thought's missing. That's interesting. That's something that we might borrow that. I might explore that with people. Like, what's something you want to do that would be like really challenging or completely different spin for your life? Like, what would that look like? I might challenge people to think about that, because it's not, I mean, the story you're telling is not typical for folks. Like, folks don't do this, right? They don't pause, but it's great, right? Because what are most folks doing? Probably the latter things that I mentioned, right? Like, we're a leisure country. Like, it's where we've gone to, right? Unfortunately, right? So these things are good. They're good for you as a person. They're great. And it sounds like they're awesome for your mind to just free yourself and to think about these things. Definitely something to like think about. Like, where's the next challenge? Not necessarily where's the next comfort point. Like, where's the next challenge?
It comes in phases. When we spent 3 months in Florida doing the Orlando thing, and then we bought an RV park and spent 6 months living at our own RV park, right? And we asked the kids, where do you want to go next? And they're like, we want to go back to our house. And the renters had moved out and we hadn't reloaded it yet. So I said, hey, well, at the end of June, because our daughter was living here and renting out the extra bedrooms, I said, the last renter is moving out at such and such time. We'll just head back after that. So I took my 18-year-old, she turned 18, big 2-week tour of Portugal for her graduation trip. We attended like a early retirement mastermind while we were there. So it was a bunch of other people who had retired early or were working on it. And talk about signposts, right? Get yourself a group of people who share your same values of what they're going for. And so we went to Portugal to go hang out with them for a week. And then we spent the other week touring around and seeing like, do we want to move to Portugal? Just kind of using it as a little bit of a tester trip, right? And then now we're back in our house in Salt Lake City. It was the only house we had that we could move into. It was one of our rental houses. So we ended up selling our personal home and moving into this rental house while we just kind of, again, sit and think about what's going on, what's going to happen next. It gives us a respite. And it's really important if you're going to do something crazy like, be around for a year and a half, or we're going to go hike a trail, to give yourself respite moments where you can do something that is less grueling.
Yeah.
And it's actually just been really fun. But we still have to unpack and reorganize and kind of take the house over from being a rental and getting our stuff out of storage and figuring out where everybody's going to go, how we're going to fit. Like, so there are still problems to solve, which are interesting, and you wish away your problems. But have you ever had a period of life where things are going really, really well and you're so bored? And I heard a statement once that people manufacture negative drama because they don't have enough positive drama. And so that, to me, as an ADHD high achiever type of person, that I said, okay, I better manufacture enough positive drama that I don't have the headspace or the care to get involved in negative drama. So that's really been a guiding principle for me. If I do start getting bored, it's like, or I start getting down in negativity, or getting wrapped up in other people's drama, which, we're all in families and it happens, right? So just to be able to say like, okay, what positive drama can I get in my life so that I can disconnect from the negative?
I like that. Yeah, I look around and you see, and it relates back to what you said earlier. Like, the problems that we're talking about are good problems, but they're still problems. And then, like, our human brain is wired and engineered to watch out for tigers and lions and stuff, right?
Yep.
There's no tigers and lions anymore. So we make tigers and lions out of other things that we can find, because our brains got lizard brain, I think what Tony Robbins says, right? And that's just the way your brain works, right? So you need to kind of like self-manage that a little bit. The first part of what you said, going to Portugal and the mastermind, can you talk a little bit about, this is interesting, right? So like, you're trying to think your way through a place with no road signs. You're not alone on that journey though, right? There are others that are doing this too. Talk about the importance of masterminds, the value taken out of there.
Oh boy. Yeah. It's the importance of seeking out non-mainstream support when you're doing something that's non-mainstream. A lot of the stuff that we choose to do, we'll go mainstream first, right? Because it is easier. It's more people can support you through it. You have a lot more resources. It's something you've kind of grown up with, you feel. So we always try the mainstream thing out and see like, is this working for us? But when I was 20, I was diagnosed with a health problem that really did have to force me to think outside the box on my nutrition, diet, lifestyle, my fertility, things like this. And so I think a little bit from the beginning, you have these experiences that just have to force you to get a little bit off the beaten path and try something different. And then we started homeschooling our kids. We tried the mainstream thing first, and it wasn't really working that well. So I'm like, okay, so I pulled one kid out. Let's try this with her. And I found myself a tribe of other homeschoolers. And then we started getting even off more mainstream, like in unschooling and things like that. And there were support groups out there. And I thought, okay, so my family and our friends watching this thought we were crazy, because they never heard of anything like unschooling. I knew that I was not a trailblazer because we had hundreds and even thousands of people in our online and local support groups who were doing it and doing it well, and they're blazing the trail that we can follow. You just have to choose which path you're going to take, but it's not like I'm out there bushwhacking this crazy kind of stuff. I always find a group of people who are doing it. And you can find a group of people for any crazy thing. Like, look at the flat earth community. I'm not a flat earther, but you're watching people get kind of sucked into this stuff. And they have this whole community of people who are going to tell them whatever they want to hear. And they can't leave the flat earth community Because if you stop believing that they're at this flat, you basically get kicked out of your social group. So it's very important to understand, one, there's somebody out there for you, no matter what crazy thing you are doing, go find them. But make sure that it's not so crazy you're drinking Kool-Aid and you're going to get sucked into some kind of a strange cult. And we see this all the time with high achievers, like the cult of the positive mindset, like toxic positivity, and the self-help hole that sometimes people can go down. So it's just really important to surround yourself with other people who are doing what you want, but don't let your brain fall out. So that's why I still do some stuff pretty mainstream, because it keeps me focused on reality. Right? And it's really easy to get off on these groups. So go find a group, find a mastermind, make sure your brain's not falling out, exhaust free and low cost opportunities first. And like, for example, this mastermind in Portugal, I paid a couple $100 for the year-long program. Wow. And then we spent a couple thousand to actually go to Portugal. It didn't go to those mastermind leaders. We paid the airlines and hotels and all that trip anyway. And so for me, it was like, well, I found this group because we were thinking of moving to Portugal. And it just was a coincidence that they turned out to be a retirement early in Portugal group. And I thought for me, it was like, well, let's go check that out. So it was not a low cost, but it really only, it cost us probably less than 10 grand for my daughter and I to go do. They have a great trip, mother-daughter bonding. So when you're thinking about how much money you want to spend on this, it's really, really easy to overspend on these kinds of things. And so free, low cost, in-person stuff, clubs with low entry fees. If you're going to join a very high-priced mastermind, that's an advanced technique. Do the low cost and the free, and so to kind of work your way into that. And sometimes I just feel like if people want to be around high achieving people who are like them, I'd almost rather just go invest in a deal with them, like in a joint venture, or invest in a deal that now I can network with other people doing that kind of stuff. Because instead of spending $50,000 or $30,000 on a mastermind, it's just take that money and like go be a passive investor in somebody else's deal. And you're going to hang out with the same kind of people. Because I learned early on, the very first real estate transaction I did, I was actually a hard money lender for somebody else, because I didn't know what I was doing with that pile of money. Tried to buy an apartment building, tried to all that. So while I was learning, I just put it out to work in a hard money loan. And boy, he answered the phone when I called. Boy, he paid me to mentor me. It's really, so think about those kind of opportunities. If you have some cash to drop on a high price mastermind, think like, where else can I put this cash by investing with somebody, or what other options that you can get the same benefit without just paying a high ticket price. So I always go for that stuff first.
That's a really good point. It reminds me of Tim Ferriss's story, where he was contemplating spending money on MBA or being an angel investor. You can,
yes,
if you know anything about Tim Ferriss, you know which choice he chose, and it works out pretty well for him. Is the choice to be the investor. You can learn while you're accumulating wealth as well. That's interesting. Do you look at I want to explore this mastermind thing a little bit more. Do you think some of the high price ones are worth it, or are you like, you know what, the price tag's too high? It feels, I don't want to say scammy. Maybe that's not the right terminology for me to use, but it doesn't feel right. Is that just a turn off right away, where you're like, I like this person, but really that much? That doesn't feel right.
It's not a turn off right away. And I think the turning point that I had with that, because at first it was a turn off, like 20,000 with this guy and 30,000 with that guy, and now I have to apply to join this one, and it's still 25 grand a year. So you get surrounded by it, and you're like, I could be dropping so much money on this stuff. But then I kind of stopped and I realized, like, it's the same like 6 masterminds over and over and over and over again. Okay, let's just pretend I'm going to join all of them, right? This year I'm going to join this one. Next year I'm going to join that one. It's like, I don't know, say 150 grand.
Yeah.
And by the time I get through all of them in the next 5 to 6 years, there'll probably be a couple new ones, right? So just say, like, if you want to budget $20,000 or $30,000 a year to join these, maybe just join one at a time. But I started thinking about it a little bit differently from that standpoint. Like, I could join all of these and still only spend $150K on education. And for me, it was like, let's try a couple of them out. It's very specialized, though. I don't join like general Masterminds. It's a skill that I'm currently actively really working on, and I either hire a coach or join a group. Usually the coaches come with the group, right? That I'm looking to hone a very specific skill. Plus, I know most of the people. There are only 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. Right? I know most of the people in them already, and I can just call them, say, knowing what you know about me, am I a good fit for this? And 90% of the time, they say no. They're like, don't bother.
Oh wow.
So, but I'm open to it.
Yeah.
And some of them I buy, and I'm like, I don't really feel like I got my money's worth out of that. But at the same time, some of them I get into, and I'm like, I either learned a lot or I learned that I'm on the right track, and that's valuable as well.
Yeah. The confirmation of here we are again on the lonely road, right? All of a sudden a sign pops up and you're like, yeah, path's that way. Oh, all right.
Yep.
I'm on the right path. Yeah, there's something to be said for that too.
Get no signposts.
Yeah.
You just have to decide, like, is figuring out if I'm on the right path worth the 25 or the 15 or the 30 grand for this one. I've done one that was 50K. I made all my money back from that one pretty fast, actually. It was really like the first deal I did, made it back. So I was like, okay, well, and I don't do that anymore. Well, I do actually still use a lot of those techniques. It was a creative financing big mastermind that I signed up for, and that was worth it. And then I think I've spent 30,000 on 2 different sales coaches, because that's where my weakness is, like closing, sales, the whole sales cycle, right? Totally worth it. One, yes, I'm on the right track, I'm doing the right things, but also just learning how to have conversations with people and not sound like a car salesman.
Yeah.
Being able to write better copy and have real conversations with people about their investments, rather than saying like, oh, invest with me, you call me today. Like, all of that stuff is just, it's outdated. People see right through it. And as much as I hate to admit it, what we do when we're basically selling investments, selling securities, that's what we do.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, to not be a slimy salesperson, you need to learn how to be a salesperson. So I went out and learned how to do it because it felt wrong and it wasn't sitting right to even have these conversations or reach out and offer opportunities to people. Because a lot of times they reach out to us, they're like, oh, how'd you retire early? Tell me more about it, right? But when you're trying to fund a deal, sometimes you have to do outbound, and it felt very wrong to me. Like, I'm here to help people, give them opportunities, all of that. But if I'm outbounding and talking them into it, like, how am I actually helping them solve their problems? And Steve Jobs would be like, people don't know what their problems are. They don't know what solution they want. So getting over that mental block was totally worth 30 grand, right? With 2 different coaches. So yeah, it's a thing. It's valuable. I just pace myself, take my time, take it real slow.
That's interesting. Yeah, I learned that sales process sort of the hard way. 200 plus cold calls a day for 9 months.
Yep.
And boy, the first email, I'll tell my little marketing. I feel really bad for me. So the first email I ever sent, like marketing, trying to convince someone to do something, the response I got back was, I'm retiring tomorrow, but over the last 30 years of my entire career, I've never seen an email sent with more marketing jargon and gibberish in it than yours. Congratulations. That was the first response I ever received back on my first ever marketing email. And I'm like, okay, lesson learned there. Need to change that copy a little bit. So yeah, I started learning the hard way how to do this. I was so bad at it. So bad. And still to this day, like, yeah, the outbound, you're still laughing at me. The outbound cold calling it's tough. It's difficult to sort of do. It's not the first thing on the priority list. But the one thing I learned was, guess what? It does. It works.
It works.
Man,
cold calling and email
works.
Number 1, highest ROI on your time and any money you put into it. Because it's kind of free, but it's not totally free, right? You need some systems, maybe some subscriptions to some organized, maybe a coach. Like, it's not free, but it's definitely the highest conversion is cold calling and email. And that's why we still bugging people. People want to schedule a call with me, investwithemma.com, are going to go into an automated drip system, email campaign. And I have to ask them, like, do you want that, or do you want me to turn it off?
Yeah.
But it's just things that you've got to do, and you've got to have that frank conversation with people, or you're just going to look like all marketing jargon, salesman slinging kind of garbage. And I just say, look, like we got a drip campaign. Which ones are useful to you? Which ones are not? Let me get you to the right funnel here, or I can just turn it off. Like you're never going to see a deal if you DND the email.
Yeah.
Like you won't see it, right? I'm not calling. I don't. Maybe I would, but you have to be open to certain types of communication if you really do want to do business with that person.
Yeah.
So that's sometimes frustrating when they're like, "No, I don't want any emails." I'm like, I don't know how else to tell you about.
You want me to call you every 5 minutes? Is that more appealing? How should we do this a little bit? I don't know.
We did create a funnel for that. If they don't want to email, like just call me when you have a deal. We actually did create a funnel for that, so I can filter my list, and they're like, but we can only have like 15 or 20 people on it at a time. Because otherwise, what's the point, right?
Yeah.
So if they really are going to invest and they don't want email, then we'll put them on that list. But if they just are tire kicking, then we don't put them on the list.
A lot of tire kicking going on. I suppose we should talk about real estate too a little bit, huh?
Oh, is this a real estate podcast? Should we be talking about real estate?
Enough of those conversations. I'll ask generally, like, what are you looking at? What's the state of affairs? Are you finding deals? I'm getting a lot of deals across my desk that don't pencil.
Yeah,
a lot of that going on.
You're always going to be getting a lot of deals coming across your desk that don't pencil. When we were at the height of the market, nothing penciled because it was too expensive, and now nothing's penciling because the loans are too expensive, or nothing's penciling because people can't kind of admit like that the values have fallen. It's like, I think that's one thing about raising capital is I look through a lot of deals that are at least home first base. I'm looking for home runs, but pretty much everything I look at is at least first base, because I'm not talking to frontline like the brokers or the owners. Like because we raise capital for other people to run businesses, they're bringing me their deals that are already under contract, have already been underwritten, or they already have hard earnest money. Like they're committed and they know what they're doing because they're experienced. Sometimes a beginner, somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience, will send me a deal that's kind of a dud, right? But most of the deals that we look at, because we're kind of picky with the operators that we'll work with, are pretty good. So we're seeing a lot of deals that were coming through for about the last 2 years in multifamily were okay, right? First base. We weren't really seeing what I would consider home runs. I think in the last 2 years, I've only looked at like 2, maybe 3 deals that I was like, I'd invest my own money in that deal, right? And 2 of them have just been in the last couple of months. Yeah. We had one last year that I passed on because we need more cash flow, and we don't want to be investing in equity deals because equity gives us depreciation that saves us money in our taxes, right? But large properties, especially heavy value adds, it's like new construction, they're not going to cash flow very well for the first couple of years. And so we were really needing to focus on cash flow. So we added hard money lending to our fund. And those deals are still everywhere. And the nice thing about that is if the flipper loses money, it doesn't cut into my profits, right? I'm a bank. I get paid first lien position on that house. We're very experienced flippers. Our partners that we brought in a couple of specialists in hard money to the fund with us to like 50-80% of the deals we do are now hard money because we needed the cash flow and we're experienced with that. We give hard money loans. We've taken hard money loans. Like we felt like this is a great way to bridge the gap with the equity stuff that's still settling out, right? We have enough equity and losses from the last couple of years that our tax situation is pretty set. We sold a personal home, so we're not getting taxed on any of that. So we can put that in interest income. I think that's the thing to remember is you have earned income and unearned income, and interest is earned income, and you're going to get taxed like short-term capital gains, active income, whatever you want to call it, right? Interest is earned income. So if we're going to take on earned income, we need to have a tax abatement strategy to deal with earned income. And so we have still unearned income coming in through the forms of rents, a few distributions from some companies that we've invested in, and we're both real estate professionals. So having those properties that may not be cash flowing great right now because maybe they're underperforming, or maybe they just never cash flow very well in the first 4 or 5 years, right? The advantage is at the sale. So we're poised to sell several of them this spring, and that will all be coming in as capital gains and we will need to redeploy that into equity projects to save money on taxes. But in the meantime, we have enough depreciation out there before we sell those, right? That we can make as much money as we want on the interest income or the earned income side without any kind of problem. So our earned income right now is interest income from our own loans. Eventually, as the fund does better, because right now we're still in paying off expenses, our startup expenses. And then once the fund becomes profitable, that will also be earned income, like management fees. We do collect some points on the loans that we have, things like that. So we're just kind of getting geared up to be able to take advantage of these deals that are really starting to become more common over the next year to year and a half as distressed sellers just can't keep their heads above water anymore. And we're there, sounds vulture-ish, we're there to help them out, because when I have a property that's not going well, I'm sure glad when someone buys it from me.
For sure. Yeah, it's sort of, it's circle of life stuff, right? Like, yeah, it sounds vulturous, but what's worse is sort of these zombie properties. I guess I'm used to it from the finance side when we talk about zombie banks. These are bad things.
Yes.
These are bad things. They linger, they sit, they don't get, they're probably not, if we're talking about multifamily, they're probably not going to be great places to live. It's not really a community. So these are So yeah, things need to transact. They need to flush their way out. And it's good to have people there to invest in it. If they're not there, then what? Right? We have a property that falls into non-usefulness at some point.
Somebody has to buy it. It's sometimes it's the least bad solution to a big problem. But at the same time, and we had a property that we were limited partners in, where we had about the same amount of experience operating as the operators, and they valued that. And so they would call us if they thought we had something to add, right? And so that property ended up foreclosing. It was a horrible experience for us. Wow. But being asked to participate in finding a buyer, finding rescue capital, finding whatever they needed to try and bail out the situation, I learned a lot. I learned a ton, and I met a lot of new people because I was pounding the phones looking for equity rescue, and I was pounding the phones looking for people who were wanting to buy it at a discount. And I just realized, like, these are valuable lessons, and I kind of paid a mastermind price for it.
Yeah.
I learned more from that failure than I probably did from any mastermind that cost the same amount of money.
LPs are experienced in this now, and they're going to experience it in the future. How do you, any advice for those folks? Like, I mean, it sucks. I don't know what to, I mean, knock on wood, literally. I mean, we haven't had investors go through this process. We've had, disappointment, underperformance, things we don't like, right? But not a bankruptcy situation or a total loss property. How should LPs think their way through that?
That's a great question. I met someone yesterday. I'm like, I want to have you on my podcast, right? Because she and her husband both have great jobs. And they invested a couple $100,000, almost $500,000 into something like 5 different LP. They lost every dime. And I asked her, I said, because I lost the one as an LP, and the rest of them we have are either doing well because we got good stabilized debt before the interest rates went crazy. Keeps raising my thumb here every time I talk with my hands. It gives me a little thumbs up there.
Like every time you said earned income, it like thumbed up. I'm like, how is this looking? Interesting.
I just talk with my hands a lot, so show your palms. It's stress-free. Sorry for all the thumbs up if you're watching this on video. Where was I? Oh, she was telling me like how she was recovering from it, and she said, maybe I need to have a successful investment before I come on your podcast to talk about her recovering. But she's still in the game and still talking about investing. She's retooling a little bit, and they still have their great jobs. And so just understanding, and here's what got me through it: understanding that in real estate, you're going to lose money probably every 10 years. That's the cycle. If you're going to dollar cost average, you're going to buy at the height and at the bottom, right? You can't time the market. Stop trying. Just DCA and across just the same way you would in the stock market, and plan on every 10 years, I'm probably going to get stung, right? And I'm lucky that I was in it for 5 years before I got stung. So I learned a lot. I made a lot of money, and then I was like, well, there's the DCA thing, just had it. And so I had that attitude of I'm going to lose money every 10 years. And then I did. And then the next year and a half are going to be some of the best deals that I'm ever going to see in my life. If I'm going to lose by the mistake of buying at the height, because I don't know where the height is, nobody does.
Yep.
But if I'm going to make the mistake of buying at the height through a dollar cost average strategy, I better be also buying at the bottom. And if you lose money at the height and you quit, you're going to lose that opportunity to buy at the bottom. Yep. This is the most important thing for any investor. We say buy low, sell high, but then we lose money at the height, and we have all this self-doubt come in, and then we don't buy low. And it's just it's so frustrating to me. And people are looking at me that I lost money or whatever, and they're like, oh man, I just, I could never invest with her, trust her, whatever. You're going to lose money in real estate every 10 years. In the stock market, you're going to lose a lot more often.
Yeah.
So it's just more volatile. And the fact that you can buy in and buy out whenever you want. And there's a stability to private equity because people can't sell on whims that you're just not going to find in public markets. That lack of liquidity is a blessing. First of all, we're not marking our pricing every day the way that you do if you have a ticker.
Thank God.
But we're also not, so our values don't go down as fast because we're not marking them every day like that. And even if the values do eventually go down with the marker when it does come up periodically, you can't really sell it. There's not much secondary market for this kind of stuff. And with tokenization, maybe there's an argument to be made that eventually these kinds of markets will become more volatile because tokenization will increase the liquidity. But right now, we don't have that at all. And I don't know if that will ever go mainstream. And so that private equity stability, lack of volatility, and lack of liquidity is a blessing. And so just remembering that and watching what's going on in the stock market and those public markets. I have stocks. I love public markets. I love private markets. Diversification, gonna lose money occasionally. Try and minimize it. And get educated, get confident, because the second you lose money is the second you start second guessing everything that you're doing, and you have to follow the path that your mentors and people that you look up to and people who have done it before you, they will tell you, and you have to just power through it and keep going because you really believe that it's right. And let's take this from a religious standpoint. Somebody who believes in God can have a setback in their life and not lose their faith in God because they understand that God's not just going to pave the red carpet for you. They understand that this is something that is more long-term. And so for people who can think about it in more of a religious context like that, it's the same thing. You're following a plan, you're following a path, you're following somebody that you respect, believe in, and you know that eventually if you keep at it, that this will be successful. You're going to have losses along the way. And the team that wins the Super Bowl lost some games that season most times, right? Especially in baseball, the World Series winners, how many games did they lose that year they won the World Series?
Yeah. I mean, winning 60% of your games would be a phenomenal season, right? It means you lost 40. Yeah. I mean, I pull the parallel here, like missing the winner is the part that makes me the saddest. So we watched a lot of people from the public market side experience 08, 09 and go into a shell. You're like, I'm never investing again.
Yep.
Well, they missed a decade worth of beautiful gains. Like that to me is sad.
That's the tragedy.
The 20, 30, 40, 50% in 08, 09, which you don't want to do anyways. But if you do, it's sadder to me missing a decade worth of upside. That makes me sad. And it all kind of comes back to like, there's no process. There's no process.
Yeah.
So whatever we're doing, whatever we're investing in, we need a process to invest and participate. If we don't have one, we're subject to our lizard brain. Well, that's a scary place to roam around in. Don't make investment decisions in the lizard brain. That's not good.
Dollar cost averaging is what saved my mental health through all of this because I really committed to dollar cost averaging. I also spent a lot of time looking into the stock market specifically. There's not a lot of data out there on private markets for this, but in the stock market, people who come into a lump sum of money usually do better if they just dump it all in the stock market than if they leak it out slowly. So these kinds of things, this kind of data has really just helped me say, okay, I'm gonna dump lump sums when I have it. You know, I have money sitting on the sidelines, losing money, that kind of thing. but I want to be cautious. I don't want to have money burning a hole in my pocket. I'm just going to invest in whatever. But if you're in the scene and you keep up with, say, 5 or 6 operators that you trust, like private fund managers, and a couple of maybe solid index funds that you like in the public markets, then when you do get a lump sum, you'll know exactly what to do with it because you've been doing that prep work before that money came in. And if you don't have a lump sum, that's when you just dollar cost average, just dump in, save as much as you can, live on less, and invest as much as you can handle. I can handle pretty scorched lifestyle. Like I lived out of a backpack for 3 months. I live now in one of my rental houses. Like I only spend money on stuff that is really, really important to me. Yeah. Same as with a diet. Some people are like, I could never give up ice cream. I'm like, then don't give up ice cream. Yeah. But then you should give up cake and cookies and pies and other things that you like, but it's not ice cream. Like save the calories for the ice cream. And that's what I do on lifestyle. I only spend money on stuff that is super high value for me. And then I just don't spend money on the rest of it. And that way I could get more money to dollar cost average.
That's right. I love this. I mean, this has been awesome. I thank you so much for hopping on here. We could probably talk for another 2 hours easily.
Yes.
Part 2.
You've never been accused of not talking about
this. Same. Yeah. I've been told to shut up once or twice, but yeah.
Maybe a few times, yeah.
Might have happened. We definitely do part 2. Emma, where can people find you?
I have a podcast called Passive Income Adventures. Brandon was on it a couple of months ago. Definitely a great episode talking about how to be able to figure out like where you're going from here. How do you divest that real estate without paying too much taxes? So that was a really good episode. We just interview people who are doing the passive income retirement thing, whether they're semi-retired, working on it, or they've already been retired for years, just sharing stories and getting a tribe of people that you can surround yourself with who are doing what you're doing and can leave some signposts behind. So you can check that out on YouTube, Passive Income Adventures. We also have Spotify and iTunes. And if you want to actually talk to me on the phone, free calls, investwithemma.com. And it just goes right to my calendar. And I myself will pick up the phone. It won't be like my little sales associate, virtual assistant. We can talk for half hour or so about what's important to you, what goals are, and if I can help you, great. If not, I know a lot of people that I can hopefully help hook you up with somebody who can solve the problem that you're working on.
I love it. Again, Emma, thank you so much. This has been awesome. And
thank you so much
for listening. Thank you for listening. We'll talk next time. See ya.